All right, folks, climb out of your hyperbaric chambers and put on your 28 wearables because it's time for another webinar with the DNA Company. If it's your first time here, my name is Justin Harris, and I'm a certified functional genomics practitioner. And tonight we're discussing biohacking, and we're going to be discussing the good, the bad, the ugly. It's such a big industry now that there's a lot of moving parts to it. And to be honest, I think that the biohacking industry was kind of born out of necessity. I think that a lot of people are frustrated when it comes to kind of mainstream medicine and that approach. And people want to take their health into their own hands. People want to have a way to make themselves feel better. People want to find different ways to self quantify, self treat. And I think that's a good call for a lot of people. But with no guidance, this industry will eat you alive. I mean, there's certainly a lot of good innovation out there in the biohacking industry, but the window is open as well for a certain amount of tomfoolery, as well as for even, dare I say, snake oil salesmanship. So this is something that needs to be navigated. And I think that having some professional guidance here and having some diagnostics and things that can really personalize a biohacking approach can get you really far and hopefully make it so that you're safe on the journey and not spending all of your money on biohacks either. So that's what we're going to be getting into tonight. Joining me to have this discussion is the great and powerful Dr. Krista Kosterman. Welcome.
Bonjour, monsieur. It is delightful to be here this evening, and I'm looking forward to getting into this conversation with you because I think we both come at it from a similar spirit insofar as we want it to help and support people, but I think different levels of skepticism and conservatism. And so I think it's going to be such a strong conversation between the two of us for that reason. And I'm really looking forward to it. So audience, hello, Justin, hello. I'm excited for this. Yeah, and so is Napita.
Good, good. And
Yeah.
it's a really almost buzzwordy term now, right? Biohacking. And I think
Mm.
that it's quite all encompassing for so many different things. I mean, it's like my initial approach to it is with a little bit of skepticism because I'm always
Yeah.
coming from that sort of ancestral place first. We were
Yeah.
just talking before this webinar, and I said, if I have the option of sitting in my office and
Yeah.
shining artificial panels of red and blue light and different things on my body, or if I have the option to just go for a walk in the sunshine, I mean, you can guess which
Yeah.
one I'm going to pick as a primal health coach. But sometimes the sun's not there. Sometimes
Yeah.
there's smoke outside from forest fires, and maybe I am better off in certain circumstances relying on, the biohacking gadgetry. So I think it has a place and a purpose, but I
Yeah.
think that we need to navigate the field because there can be a lot of errors along the way if you don't do that.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I see in particular when I speak with family and friends around what I do and then what they see online, there also becomes this really big element because this is not something necessarily brought forward by your doctor. There's an element of you learn about it through a friend of a friend, or you learn about it through social media, or you learn about it through, right? There's so many different channels. And I think that naturally will breed one of two things, either incredible skepticism. And so the baby's thrown out with the bathwater in that it's actually a really great product and it might be something that's really supportive of you, but you're kind of pushing it aside because it's going to be sold to you. Or separate to that, a little bit of groupthink, right? Well, if it worked for my cousin, it will probably work for me, and I'm not going to do my diligence behind it, and I'll assume that I am my cousin and that it's appropriate for me. So I think it'll be a wonderful conversation this evening, Justin, as to scrolling through the different hacks that are out there, and that for some people it's going to be the perfect hack, and for others not so much.
Yeah, and it's important to note too here that you can go too far in either direction, I think. Like I know people personally who they're pretty sick, like they've got issues, as far as like even things like cancer and
Hmm.
what have you, but they won't listen to me at all as far as like I'm like, well, let's try this grounding mat. Let's try a brain
Yeah.
tap because they're all in their head and they're like, no, no, like if their doctor didn't mention it specifically, then they're not going
Yeah.
to use it. But then they turn around and all they do is complain about the health problems that they have and how their doctor put them on this and it makes them feel terrible. It's you can go too far in the medical direction and you can go too far in the biohacking direction. And really, a successful marriage of the both of these things is probably going to land you in the best case scenario.
Yeah. Yeah. So before we dive into this audience, I wonder what hacks have you heard about? And what hacks? Are there any specific hacks that you want us to be diving into this evening? So I wonder before we start our conversation, Justin, before we start our State of the Union, if you will, um, Katie or Vanny, if you could please pull up the poll questions, that can ground us a little bit in tonight's conversation. As the audience is furiously typing, I'd love to know about this hack or that hack. Yeah, so we asked you, audience, what hacks have you tried in the past year? And the number one hack that we're seeing is intermittent fasting. So about 80% of the audience has done that. We're seeing a lot of people doing red light therapy as well. Just I know you're a huge fan of that, as am I in certain circumstances. Um, and then following just after that, we see a mix of wearable tech, nootropics, and then cold plunges and cryotherapy. God bless you. Good Lord. The audience knows I just hate the cold. That's no shade on cold therapy. It's just it's cold. All right. The next question we asked is, how would you rate the effectiveness of the biohacks you've tried so far? And this is an interesting question. Um, 50% of the audience is saying somewhat effective. So of all the things that we just listed, people are kind of like, it was okay, but wasn't life changing. 17% said extremely effective. I'm curious, audience, what you found was actually extremely um, effective. And please be specific, because I think I've just asked, what biohacks do you want to know? And now I'm also asking a separate question. So please do let us know. Um, and then unfortunately, 30% were saying, I really couldn't tell. It didn't do any harm, but I didn't see any betterment, which is common, especially when the hack is either snake oil, Justin, as you said, or misappropriate or not on point to whatever you're working on. Yeah. We asked the audience, what is your primary goal when trying biohacks? And a majority is looking to boost longevity or cellular health. I like that, very targeted and specific. The next offering here is going to be increasing energy or focus. Yeah. Um, we and then the last question that we asked here is, would you be interested in biohacking based on your genetics? And we got a lot of yeses and maybes. And so for those that are on yeses and maybes, please do listen along to this webinar. We're going to give you several opportunities of how we can connect and support you in that understanding. Yeah.
Yeah, it makes
Mhm.
sense. And I mean, I think that biohacking kind of represents the how, with a lot of this stuff.
Mhm.
It's like it's what kind of modalities am I going to throw at this particular health problem, and it's like if you don't really understand the underlying systems behind it, then perhaps you're not in alignment with what actually needs to be accomplished in the first place. So it's like, let's say you were going to throw a bunch of biohacks at your gut, and you were going to do peptides and
Mm.
probiotics and fasting
Mm.
strategies and on we go. You might want to start with a diagnostic tool to understand what's going on there first. I think that's where precision medicine really comes in, is understanding like, well, why am I throwing these biohacks in? That's the how, but we need the why in there first, right? So we come in right there because we're able to provide actual information and insights into the
Mhm.
functionality of your body. And gosh, it narrows that list down quite a bit when you know what's really going on.
Yeah. Yeah. I value what you just said there, Justin, because I think a lot of people, what they'll do is they see something fancy online or they hear about something fancy from their cousin. They acquire it hoping to have this general feel better because they heard their cousin or this ad claim that it would make them feel better without being specific as to what exactly do they want to feel better about. Is it overall energy levels? And if so, how do you know if your energy shifted? Or maybe your cousin was using it for something that they, like isn't applicable to you. And so you're not actually going to garner that benefit there. And so I really like that you put very eloquently, start with the end in mind. And so figure out where you want to get, what exactly you want to be better, so that we can figure out, is it working for you? Is it appropriate for you?
Yeah, and that's optimization as well. Like I'll use a quick example of myself actually. Like I had quite an issue with breakouts for a long time. I talked about this yesterday, how I was on antibiotics for a long time, and thereafter I had to fix my gut and all these different things. But I continued to have that issue all the way up until I had real information to work on. and I'm spending all this money on skincare and on red light and on this, that, the other thing, things that independently are still good calls. But I didn't fix the problem until I looked and I saw, and I was like, okay, my genes are suggesting this. And then I had lab work done. And it's like, okay, it appears that I have some liver congestion going on. It appears that there's protein putrefaction going on. So I needed to look deeper and I needed to add in really kind of specific interventions. And once I did that, that's when things started to move the needle. But I was already spending all manner of money and research and this, that, the other thing. And it was like once I actually had data to work with, then the needle started moving. So it's a really important metric to do.
Yeah, yeah. I'm um I'm seeing a lot of the audience asking for hydrogen water, for different fasting protocols. I'm seeing a few things for vibration therapy, for red light therapy, and a few people have also asked after deeper testing. So, for example, like the DNA 360, we would consider deeper testing insofar as it's not something you're going to be getting from your GP, and it offers a deeper understanding of body, right? And I wonder maybe if that is a little bit where we start off this conversation before jumping into some of the technologies and the protocols, because I think that's the first line of biohacking that to an extent is almost forgotten, because while it might be results on a piece of paper, it's not really a physical thing that you either do or take. It's not a physical thing you engage with. And yet, Justin, as you're so wonderful in pointing out, it really does lay the foundation of, right, what hack is most appropriate for you.
Absolutely, and there's
Mm,
so many little examples that we can provide, and even just from doing this as a practice as well. Like another
mhm,
example I have is I had a patient who was using DIM, and they were using like a pretty high dosage of DIM year round, and they didn't know that they actually have what we call a balanced hormone profile. So there's not a lot of sex hormone being made there, and they didn't have a lot of red flags with regard to these estrogen metabolites that warrant DIM usage. And if you overuse DIM and you're not making a lot of estrogens and things in the first place, you can pretty easily over moderate that pathway. And a magical ingredient like DIM, who for somebody else is like an amazing biohack. I mean, it's just a cruciferous vegetable extract that can moderate the toxic
mm,
pathways there and put it back into a protective pathway. For some people, that's fantastic, but this individual was totally over moderating it, and the DIM was
mhm,
causing GI issues. They were like
mhm,
not feeling good. And I took her off of the DIM, and next thing you know, she feels pretty good. And she probably would have been fine on just the inclusion of normal cruciferous veggies. But again,
mhm,
I looked at those hormone pathways. I had those indicators. I clinically correlated it with
yeah,
the supplement list that she was on, and it was like 100 milligrams of DIM. Like you're talking way too much for a 100-pound female. Uh, and that was the little indicator there. So I found it in the genes, I correlated it, and boom, that's what it was. Now, if you don't know that, you might be afraid to come off your DIM and go, well, I know I need this. I'm a woman, of course I need some DIM. That's a biohack, right? Without the personalization, you can very easily misstep, and you can over moderate pathways and then under moderate other ones. So yeah, the DNA 360 is one of the most useful documents you're going to find because it includes metrics for pretty much every primary system of the body, detox systems, all of these different things we look at. So one document to give you all of those indicators, I can't recommend it enough.
yeah. No, I I love and admire kind of how you were able to connect those dots, right? Of someone who intended to do a really good thing with a biohack and it just wasn't aligned with them. And they were seeing the negatives of it, not because it's a negative thing, it just wasn't the right fit for their body. Yeah.
Yeah.
When I'm thinking through other biohacks, and again, I appreciate I come at this a little bit from a how do we monitor the core of the health? Like, how do we establish really good health before we start reaching for that longevity of health? Because if we don't have that health, why on earth do you want the longevity? And so some of my more favorite biohacks here are the periodic screenings that people can do in order to assess the aging as well as the cancer risk. within body. I like those biohacks, at least within metric terms, because they really solidify how quickly, how old is body getting, right? How focused do I need to be in with some of my work efforts, right? Some of the biohacks, be it lifestyle, diet, intervention. So one of the things I really like is our DNA aging test. It's a methylation based test as well as an immune marker based test. And so what it does is it takes a blood sample and it peers into the body and it says how quickly is body aging, right? And remember, we talk about how do you track whether one of these biohacks is working for you. This can be one of certain ways to go about tracking, because if you start off and you're aging at a quicker rate, right? You're aging 5 biologic years for every calendar. Well, they wouldn't be that, but you're aging like 1.3 calendar years for every biologic years for every calendar year, right? You're aging quicker than you should be in the body. If you introduce hacks and you see that number come down, you know you're seeing benefit from what you're doing, which to me is really interesting, because especially when you're coming at this from I am well, I just want to get even better, it's hard to figure out where the needle has moved. So I like that, as well as some of the when it does the immune system analysis in particular, it's able to correlate a lot of that to organ systems. So instead of kind of trying to boil the ocean and fix everything in body, you're able to say, oh, it's actually my immune system that is under stress a little bit. So let me work more pointedly on that. Or maybe it's more my gut biome that isn't well, and let me work pointedly on that. So I like those sorts of tests from a biohack perspective, because I'm very plain. I like lazy medicine. And so if a test can tell me focus here, you don't have to focus everywhere, I'm just going to focus there. And so
Yeah,
far.
well, another really cool thing about those particular tests is that they have these things that they call EBPs, right? It's an epigenetic biomarker proxy. And it's actually giving you a DNA methylation based estimate of what a traditional plasma based biomarker would be.
Yeah.
But the way they do it with looking at the methylome, it's actually a little bit more current and up to date. So it's kind of a more actionable proxy in the first place. Like you'll get a DNA M based like HbA1c or a C-reactor protein reading, and it's giving you the same estimate, but it's really actually more actionable the way they do it. So if you're concerned about inflammation, like you can look at those proxies and get a really good picture of what that looks like. And when you pair that with the aging one, the Dunedin pace it's called, you can see how the inflammation is also making it so that you age faster, right? And then you add in interventions and you can do that again. And that's what's cool too, is like the DNA
Mm-hmm.
360 is a one and done until, a time comes that we may add a bunch more genes to it. The genes that we currently have are giving you a really good snapshot of your biology.
Mm-hmm.
But the Dunedin pace, you can actually take over and over again. And as you add different lifestyle interventions and target these issues, you can see how it's showing up on the test as well. So it's like something to kind of grade yourself with and really understand your level of aging. And so it's a really cool thing to add in.
Yeah. Yeah. Excellent summary of kind of the science behind how that goes about tracking age. So, Justin, why don't we move into a few of the different technologies in particular that the audience has been asking for? So, again, audience, I'm seeing a lot for hydrogen water. I'm seeing certain for NAD and other senolytics. I'm seeing things for PEMF and red light. And then I'm seeing different versions of fasting. So we'll kind of clump that together in fasting and at least acknowledge all the different ones. So, um, Justin, good sir, do you have a preference as to where we start down this yellow brick road?
Yeah, let's start with the first one that you mentioned there, hydrogen water.
Mm.
Hydrogen rich water is a really interesting thing. And it can be a really useful hack on the mitochondrial pathway. And I tend to look at a couple of metrics for this. So within the genes, I like to look at the SOD2 pathway. If you're familiar with these webinars, you've heard me describe it before. It's a HEPA filter that exists in the mitochondria to clear out free radicals. When it comes to the lab interpretation, there's a marker called 8-OHDG. That's a hydroxydeoxyguanosine. And that's actually an oxidative stress marker that's kind of cumulative. So if you have that elevated on your labs, it'll show you that, yeah, you're getting some DNA damage at the level of the mitochondria because of oxidative stress. So hydrogen water is one of these things that comes in because it activates something called the NRF2 pathway, which helps to increase the clearance of free radicals at the level of the mitochondria. Hopefully, you do that for a while and the 8-OHDG marker comes down. But if you have a suboptimal SOD2 pathway, then that would be one of those biohacks that may be appropriate for you. Or if you work out too much, that may be one of those biohacks that's appropriate for you as well, because you're creating so many oxidants, right, when you do that. Personally, there's a couple of brands I like. I mean, I'm a fan of Dr. Joseph Mercola. He's got an H2 tablet that he talks about. There's a brand called Drink HRW, and the product I think is Rejuvenation. And it's basically like an ionized form of magnesium that interacts with the water and it changes it into molecular hydrogen. All these thousands and thousands of little bubbles will start to come up. And you got to slam that while the bubbles are still there, because now it's a gas, right? And it's just going to evaporate and be a normal glass of water if you don't do it in a timely manner. But I use it myself because I have a suboptimal SOD2 pathway. And among other biohacks, I've been able to keep my 8-OHDG numbers actually below normal, even with suboptimal genetics. How about that? So these are things that you can manipulate with the right toolkit.
Yeah. Yeah, amazing. I love that you're kind of weaving genes in. I've seen a few people within the chat and the questions say, "Hey, are you going to do a section very specific to genes?" And we're going to be weaving genes into this. So it really gives insight into if you have a suboptimal presentation in this space and you're feeling it, here are different options. It's not all going to be tech based. It's not all going to be supplement based. It's not all going to be lifestyle based. We're going to make sure we cover the whole smorgasbord so that you have insight into different ways our genes can help guide biohacks so that you're finding biohacks that are supportive of you, not just the general public, right? Making sure you're not just that applying to the average, right? You're applying to the specifics. Yeah,
Absolutely.
that was a really good summary. I think I'm a bit more familiar with hydrogen, at least more in the aerosolized form, because we see a lot of research being done, especially within inhalation, to support long haul COVID in particular, but a few other conditions that are impacted or at least have nasal implications. And so, while I think that's a little bit more guided by a doctor's care in that instance, we are seeing that space really blossoming with potential because the mechanisms that Justin just mentioned, when it's an aerosolized form, in particular, contacting with those tissues right away, you thankfully lose that risk of the water losing its fizz or however you delightfully put it there.
Yeah, and there's other modalities as well. Like there's actually these like you hook them up to your bathtub. You can actually get it so you can take like a hydrogen bath, and it's effectively the equivalent of drinking like 100 glasses of hydrogen water. I have yet to dabble
Oh,
in that one due to budget purposes, but it's an
I've never
interesting
heard
kind
of
of
that.
realm. I've also seen even just bath bombs, things that you can
Mm.
do. Toss it in there. You got to get in the water once again pretty quickly, but there's a lot of different ways of getting the input there. I think that if you were going to do the inhalation aspect of it, you may also want to check your GSTP1 gene because that's got a lot to do with respiratory detoxification. And if you're suboptimal there, maybe that's a better modality for you as well. So,
Mm-hmm.
once again, the genes inform the biohacks, not the other way around.
Ding, 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 ding. All right. Where's next on our golden little pathway? Did you maybe want to go to PEMF mats and other
Yeah,
sort of devices?
oh my gosh, that's one of my favorite things. I use it every day. It's become my favorite thing to do yoga on is a PEMF mat
Mm,
because I'm just blasting my body with all these healing frequencies while I'm doing something that's more ancestral, right? Like a stretching routine
mm,
is not an advanced biohack, but this is kind of a fun thing where you can take an actual like ancestral practice and sometimes pair it with one of these modern gadgets and get more benefits, like amplify the benefit. If you're unfamiliar, PEMF is a pulsed electromagnetic field therapy, and it kind of operates on the Earth's magnetism, and it almost like pulls inflammation out of your body the way that it works. It's really cool. The one that I have is from a company called Higher Dose. I've shouted them out on this before because it's awesome, and it's the same size as me. It's like 6 feet long. and it's got all these amethyst crystals and things in there as well. So it actually gives you a lot of the grounding benefits, like the negative
Mm.
ions. And then it heats up via infrared, and you can make it like crazy hot or just kind of mildly warm if you want to. And then you've got all these different settings for the PEMF. So you can do different kind of brainwave states as well. There's ones that are more alpha and more energizing. And I'm also in love with the theta one because that's like a nap
Mm.
setting kind of a thing. So while we're talking about geeking out with this stuff, I'll share what I do. So I biohack my midday nap on this PEMF mat. I put it onto the theta setting because that pulls my brain just below sleep, basically. And then I use my Apollo Neuro, which I wear for every webinar because it keeps me from getting anxious and talking too fast. Um, so I do that as well. It has like a little power nap setting on this thing. And then I go ahead and I do a brain tap as well while I'm on there because that's like effectively hacking a meditative state. You don't have to sit there and stare at a wall. You can use the technology, press play. It doesn't ask permission. It just pulls your brain into that meditative
Mm.
state. So I do all of these things together, and it really like
Yeah.
gives me a little restorative session in the middle of the day because I've never been a napper. Like I can't. My brain is way too quick. So I use
Mm.
technology, and that's one of those areas that biohacking can absolutely be beneficial. So
Yeah.
the PEMF helps with circulation. It helps with anti-inflammatory action if you have a lot of inflammation, especially when your genes aren't working for you there. This can be one of those tools that's very beneficial, and I use it once or twice a day, every day, and I'll never go back.
Yeah. Yeah. I I wanna I your biohack of a nap I might borrow one day because I'm not a napper and I've always dreamt of being a napper. Um, but something you said that I'd like to reiterate to the audience, in particular for people who have a bit of an adversarial relationship either with meditation or technology facilitated meditation. Um, I think it's neat, Justin, that you kind of open that conversation with I do yoga on my PEMF mat. And traditionally, yoga, especially more that physical side of it, is a technology that Indians used in order to get ready for meditation, right? Indian traditions, Hindu traditions, yoga traditions, which are so steeped in both those actions and then that act of meditation, they were aware that one does not just jump onto a meditation mat and go right at it, right? They quite literally prepared for it. And so I think it's interesting in the West when people are like, oh, I want to meditate, and they think that they are the exception to the tradition of just jumping into it. And so I would offer two things. I think, Justin, it's really neat that you've well articulated how technology can be an access point for those people with really busy minds and busy days because we're not living 200 years ago or 1,000 years ago when the traditions of yoga to ready one for meditation were around. We live in a very different time, and so accessing meditation through different means makes sense because the times have changed. That's one of the consistent things you learn within meditation. Nothing stays the same. And so I think it's neat that you've just really beautifully articulated for the audience different access points to meditation. There's yoga, there's your little Apollo band, there's your mat, there's BrainTap, or while I appreciate you didn't list this, I know you could also access a meditation teacher or a YouTube, right? There's several YouTube recordings that are meant to be for people who are just jumping into it. And so I'd really encourage the audience when we talk about biohacks, meditation tends to be a known one, but not always a discussed one because there's an element of discipline and all the fun things. But hear what Justin just said, hear all these access points. We know how beneficial meditation is to the brain, to the body, to wellness, to earthing. To quote Nelly or some rapper from back in the day, you find a way, find an access point, and it does not have to be this idea of you sitting on a cushion and going om for hours on end. Meditation is arguably the best biohack for the brains. So here are all the different things that Justin just listed out as access points for it.
Yeah, well, and the more difficulty you have getting into that state, most likely the more beneficial meditating will be for you, right? Because it's like I think that we live in a very accelerated age. I can only imagine our ancestors would have had a bit of an easier time meditating because there wasn't the phone buzzing with notifications right next to them. We didn't have the Wi-Fi, different things interacting with us to make it more difficult to meditate. So now, I mean, I think it's more important than ever to kind of cut out the noise and hit that Control Alt Delete button. You know, like that's the way I look at meditation, because it's like pop up windows. That's what your brain is doing all day. You hit Control Alt Delete, it refreshes the page, and now you're all good. And it's like
Yeah.
using the tech is very valuable there because it makes it so that I don't have to do all that work,
Yeah.
right? If I don't have time for that, I can just make a little structured segment of my day where I do that via the technology. So it goes a really long way. I saw Faye in the chat mention that she tried the Apollo and it didn't work so well for her. I need to say one thing about it. Mine worked better for me the more I used it. In the very beginning, I was like, is this thing vibrating on my wrist? Like, is this really doing anything? But I used it and used it and used it, and now it's actually working quite a bit better for me. So just in case you still have it, Faye, and shout out, by the way, because you're coming to all these webinars. Like I see Faye on these all the time. Maybe give it a second try and couple it with a couple
Mhm.
other things. But it's like I find that it works better for me now that it's really started to vibe with my body, and my body tends to respond to it. But for the first like month or so, it was not what I hoped it would be, and now it is. So maybe give it another shot.
Yeah. No, and I'd extend that actually by saying, um, I think when you're trying to press the Control Alt Delete, or you're trying to get into meditation, however you want to phrase it, remember that this is a new muscle. I often see when people are like, "Oh, I'm going to learn to meditate," the first time they try it, some people actually get scared by the experience or very anxious by the experience. Not because it's scary or anxiety inducing, but it's because the first time they've actually tried to quiet their mind and their body down in a very long time, and the body sits there and the mind sits there very, very confused, right? The term is kind of monkey mind. The monkey's given nothing to do, and so the monkey freaks out a little bit. And so there's an element of discipline to a certain extent, in that you continue to show up and you continue to do these practices. And just like Justin mentioned with the Apollo, over time, that your body gets used to it. Your body's like, oh, maybe I will try this peaceful thing, this downshift thing. And then that's where the benefit is garnered. So a lot of this technology, just in beautiful point, Faye, good call out. Thank you guys so much. There's an element of repetition and building muscles around what's happening here. Just like exercise is a muscle you can build, rest arguably is a muscle that you need to build practice around. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And it's also one of those things where you have to stack certain modalities together. Like when it comes to like what Faye actually specifically said was that she had tried it for sleep and that it didn't really work
Mm,
so well. And I will say that it's very rare that one item is a needle mover when it comes to some of these equations, because like circadian disruption can happen because of things like leaky gut, or it can happen from poor detoxification processes, or nighttime elevations in cortisol. There can be a lot of other things going on with your liver, with your gut, with your HPA axis, to where just having something to kind of help pull the nervous system into this state, like an Apollo,
mm,
is not independently going to move the needle. But as a complement, right, and as an addition to a whole bunch of other strategies that are both primally based, biohacking based, lifestyle, just the rhythms of your body have to be right to pull that off. But this is one of those tools that I like because it's versatile and it can help with a bit of energy when I need it, help with a bit of calm when I need it. But it won't be a be all end all. I don't think any of these strategies independently will be.
yeah. Aptly put, sir. Aptly put, as always. Let's continue down our yellow book road. Would you like, perhaps maybe we talk about fasting next? Do you want to open the floor to that, or shall I?
Sure, I'll open it. Eating is an epigenetic signal. Not eating is an epigenetic signal, right? These are both things that our body does. Throughout all of human history, we ate and we didn't eat, right? So it's like it's pretty hardwired and built into our body. We've got these mTOR pathways, which is like a building pathway when we have nutrients present. When we don't have nutrients present, we have the AMP kinase pathway, which is like a nutrient signal pathway, which really helps your body and your cells to clean themselves out. What we're striving for is homeostasis, right? You don't want to overactivate mTOR because it can cause tissues to grow that you don't want to grow. You don't want to overactivate AMP kinase, because then it's a scarcity signal and the body's just like, okay, we're not eating because there's no food around. So fasting can be a really valuable tool, but it's one of those things that I strongly recommend personalization with. If you're not familiar with it and you jump into a 3-day bone broth fast, you're going to be hangry and up and down and emotional and low energy and high energy because the cortisol went up, and your blood sugar is going to be all over because of the cortisol. It's not something you want to dive in with both feet. However, kind of working your way into it and just skipping one meal, right? That can be a great starting point. Maybe taking a shot of ketones. There's a biohack that can help you to kind of transition into a little bit better energy production without any food. There's so many little ways that we can do it. And there's OMAD, and there's alternate day fasting, and there's prolonged fasting, and there's condensed eating windows, there's prolonged fast, water fasts. I like to talk about social media fasts. I mean, you know what I mean? Like sometimes just cutting out anything is a fast if you really think about it that way. I think it can be one of the most powerful tools possible. I really do. Like I've seen magic happen because of fasting protocols, but I've also seen people muff themselves up with it. I know a particular bodybuilder who's pretty famous in my city, and he was already at like a 3% body fat, and he started doing these 5-day fasts, and I'm telling you, it mangled his metabolism. It was a really bad call. And this is an educated guy, career pharmacist, like beast. Shout out to you if you know who you are and you're watching this. Um, but it may not be for you, and it may not be the right strategy. Guided fasting, right? And having a professional kind of hold your hand through it. That's what I recommend, because there's ways to do it and ways not to do it. You want
Yeah.
abundant signals when we need abundance, scarcity signals when we need scarcity, and you can get a lot of benefits out of fasting. Personally, I'm a big fan, but I don't think it's something you should do willy-nilly without guidance.
Yeah. I beautifully put. I think fasting is one of the most effective protocols for several different medical conditions, as well as when we have this conversation of longevity, what is one of the best things you can be doing for it outside of the basics of good diet, sleep, etc. Fasting is that thing. And I love that to a certain extent, there's an element of accessibility. Assuming you have the discipline or the ability within your life to fast, it can be a great thing for you. But I would also offer it's probably one of the most misused things I've also seen within my practice. And so this is where I'd like to offer in when we talk about biohacks, having a good healthcare provider who is on your team, who can listen to you and who can offer you third party sound good advice, as in sometimes they will say yes, that's a great idea, and sometimes they'll say no, that's not a good idea, and here's why. I think that can be arguably the best biohack, because if Justin and I are both here and sitting and saying fasting is probably one of the best things you could do outside of good sleep, etc., but it's not appropriate for everyone. The next question is it appropriate for me? And how do you find that out? That is an assessment of lifestyle, etc. I tell a lot of my patients, and again, remember I see a sick population, so couch this, but I tell them often that fasting is a privilege in that you have to be in a good, certain exceptions, but by and large, you have to be in a good state of health because, as Justin said, it is a stress on the body. And if the body is already in a state of extreme stress, this is salt on the wound, and it may not be a helpful thing. Just like if you're a menstruating female, probably you need to be very specific and careful as to how you do it, because your body's not going to respond like, mostly when fasting is discussed, we're kind of talking about a healthy male body. And so we do need to have nuance in that conversation of what happens if I'm a menstruating female? What happens if I'm an unwell male? What happens if, right? And so we've been dancing around it a little bit, but I think one of my favorite biohacks is having that champion clinician who knows you super well in your corner to help make these decisions. Yeah.
Yeah, especially because then there's an element of course correction as well, right? Because maybe we start down a path and right away we get some signals that, this isn't for you. Like if you start doing a fasting protocol and all of a sudden your libido drops to zero and you go, okay, well, why would that happen? Why do you think it would happen? It happens because you just sent a signal that
Mhm.
says there's no nutrients around. So it may not be a good idea to bring an offspring into this environment, right? So for some people, it's not going to be a particularly useful strategy, and for other people, it's going to be the best thing, the cellular cleanup and growth hormone. I've noticed that generally males do a little bit better with fasting, and I think that it makes a lot of sense as to why we would, ancestrally speaking. But to your point, Dr. K, it is a hormetic stress, right? And hormesis, when pushed too far, is just a normal stress, right? There's eustress, which is positive, and you're getting good adaptations, and then there's distress. Fasting turns into distress if you take it too far.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. Beautifuls. Beautifuls. All right, good sir. Um, Perhaps we talk about one more thing on our Yellow Brick Road before we transition into our questions and answers, because I see those becoming beautifully populated because biohacks are as plentiful as fish in the sea. And so we could probably be on here for as many days as there are. I'm out of my poetics. We could be here a long time. We'd be here a long time.
Yeah.
All right. Um, Justin, of the fish in the sea, what is the last one you want to catch and discuss more pointedly, more focusedly? Do you have a
Oh,
preference?
gosh, let's talk a little bit about cold. I think that that's one
Mm,
of those ones that's highly popular. And honestly, it's another hormetic stress, right? Like a lot of these kind of qualify under that umbrella. So once again, as a hormetic stress, you can get positive adaptations out of it, but you can also get a lot of, too much cortisol. You can get blood sugar spikes if you do it improperly. If you're one of these people that doesn't warm up again afterwards, like you have suboptimal UCP1, that's one of the genes we look at for thermoregulatory action in the body, then you may need to be aware. There's something called the mammalian dive reflex, which is like, you get immersed in cold water and you kind of hyperventilate and freak out. It's a bit of a nervous system stressor that we need to be aware of as well. So, dosage, timing, the type that you do, is it a cold shower? Is it cryo? Is it an ice bath? There's a lot of different modalities when it comes to cold. At a baseline, I'm a fan of it as a strategy. I do think that it has some great mitochondrial benefits. I think that it has some great anti-inflammatory benefits. But you need to understand that you are activating the sympathetic nervous system. You can't be in cold forever. Your body knows that. It goes, oh, we're going to die if we're in here for too long. So we are triggering certain fight or flight mechanisms. So what I recommend is, if you're one of these people that gets quite a reaction to it, you may want to add some nervous system regulations surrounding the practice, like adding in some breath work pre and post. Pre being activating and post being calming, right? Long exhales, that kind of a thing, just to pull yourself back down. I think that a quick cold shower for most people is going to get those initial anti inflammatory benefits, like a 90-second shower. Um, but the real deep healing, if you're one of these people who has like real chronic inflammation and you need serious therapy there, that's where the more advanced protocols can come into play. Now, you need to be careful and you need to be monitored. I was watching this podcast of this horror story where this girl worked for a cryotherapy lab, and she thought that she would just go in there and do it on her own, and she accidentally locked herself in. Can you imagine? Minus 200 something, and no one else in the facility, accidentally locked herself in with no time limit on the thing, and she froze to death. That's a real story. That happened at a cryo lab somewhere on the East Coast, I think. Um, so be monitored when you do some of these things, folks. Like, these are not for babies. These are real, serious protocols, and you need to be monitored. You need to have someone there. But if it's a quick cold shower, you can pull that off daily. It's a base hit. It's not a home run. You can just stack up these little base hits daily and moderate your inflammation. I think cold is one of the better tools for that. But I know a lot of people who they know that their blood sugar goes up and it's just a freak out scenario that it might not work as well for. So dose and timing, especially. I was reading research recently about doing it pre-workout versus post-workout. And interestingly, what they found was when you do it pre-workout, you actually get a really sizable dose of testosterone. Like, it boosts your testosterone if you do it prior to the exercise. But if you do it right after the exercise, especially if it's like full immersion where you're in there for too long, you can blunt some of these positive adaptations and you can end up with lower testosterone
Mhm.
and over moderating the inflammation. You need inflammation to build muscle. So timing matters as well when it comes to cold. But baseline, it's a good therapy. 2/3 of the world is covered in cold water. It's a hormetic stress that we're designed to deal with. Just do it right, folks, just like with fasting.
Yeah. I'll offer an anecdote. I've been going to a Russian sauna now for 6 or 7 years. And if you're in the GTA area, you know exactly which one I'm talking about too. And it's owned by a collection of Russians, and you see usually a mix of Eastern European folk in there. And I remember one night I was in and I was chatting with a fellow who tends the grounds and tends the saunas and the cold baths, etc. And we were chatting, and his comment to me, and this was I think I'd been going to this sauna for about 3 years at this point, and this was kind of when cold therapy and all this sort of thing was coming into popularity. And he's saying, the crowd's different in here. We're getting, people who aren't of this background and who aren't of this, coming in. He's like, I think it's great, but they're kind of funny. And I was like, oh, well, what's funny about it? He's like, it's an extreme sport to them. They compete with themselves to see how long they can stay in the sauna. And then they compete with themselves to see how long they can stay in the cold. And he's like, we don't do that stupid here. He said it in a very thick Russian accent. It was a lot more adorable when he said it. But I would offer this to the audience. I think the way sauna therapy and the way cold therapy has been presented, at least again within the Western context, is very much this competitive biohacking. If you're not in water that is minus 50 degrees, and if you're not in that water for 1 hour, like there's no benefit and you're going to fail life. I would also offer, if you go back to the traditions, right? The Scandinavian traditions, the Eastern European traditions, the Northern European traditions, they all do this on a near daily basis, and it's not to the extremes that we take it. And that's where the primary research began for this sort of benefit. When we think about sauna and we think about this sort of contrast therapy, when you're in a sauna, when you're getting hot, blood vessels are expanding, your blood's coming to the surface. And then when you get super cold, it goes squish. It's quite literally this contraction that happens within the body, and you're moving around your lymphatic fluid. This is where some of that detox and that cardiovascular benefit comes from. And you don't have to be on crazy extremes to get there. You just need enough to have that, for lack of better word, suction, that scoosh action of the lymphatic fluids. So for those that are on the webinar and they're like me and the cold is the devil, this can still be an accessible therapy to you insofar as you're really just looking enough to look at that scoosh. But to Justin's point, there are edge cases for athletic support for different things that you want that. But just think about this, because I love this therapy for people. I think it's a great biohack, but I'd also remember the tradition wasn't always in the extreme hacking. Yeah.
Yeah, minimal effective dose is typically the best case scenario with all these, right? Even fasting, exercise. I mean, that's just enough to get that stimulus and have your body react to it, and then get out and move on with your day. That's all you
Yeah.
need. We don't want to overdo any hormesis because, again, use stress turns into distress pretty quick.
Mm-hmm. Oui, oui. All right, good sir. That was a great last pick. Thank you. Even though I hate the cold, that was a solid last pick.
Yeah. Well, that's a trendy thing too, right? People talk about cold a lot now, and might as well delve in a little bit to the science of it. So I'm glad we had an opportunity.
I value that. I value that. All right. Why don't we dive into some of our questions and answers from the audience? David has our first one. Hi, David, because I think we saw you last night.
Yeah.
Um, David is saying that their DNA 360 listed several supplements under each system. Um, are the Blueprint program custom combi- Okay, are the program custom compounded supplements based on your DNA, a combination of all your DNA or just a few selected at this time? So Justin, you facilitate a lot of programs for us. Do you want to speak to, when someone comes into a program, what supplement considerations you have? And I guess what also David is talking about so the audience is aware?
Yeah, so it's important to remember that when it comes to genetic weak points, this is the default setting of your body. And these are going to be areas that require a certain amount of reinforcement. And the nutritive pathway is one of those things that we do. We're trying to just moderate genetic expression with certain nutrients. When we compound one, we also take into consideration gender and height and weight and these different things to make it so that it's the appropriate dose. So typically, what we do is we also clinically correlate, right? So if there's a patient that has a lot of inflammatory presentations, we look and we see that the genes are also representative of that. We're going to be including some of these targeted anti inflammatory ingredients. It's not necessarily going to be each and every red flag that we see, but we're going to do the main movers there, and we're going to do as many of them as we can to help moderate genetic expression. We don't compound everything either, because some of these things would be like vitamin D, for example. It's something that I would recommend taking more than once a day in a spaced manner if you have suboptimal genes, because we're dealing with the receptor and the delivery there. So we can't always compound that. And there's certain things like a fish oil, omega 3s may be very much in your interest, but you can't put an oil and a powder into the same
Mhm.
compound, right? So we land on the best case scenario that we can create. We work with compounding pharmacies, so you know that you're getting actual medical grade ingredients. Dr. Krista put tons of work into the black label and how that all goes and how it all works. But yeah, to answer the question, we do pretty much the best possible genetic expression management that we can through supplements. And then the rest of it would be your lifestyle tactics and things that we pair with it if
Mhm.
you're in a real program.
Yeah. Yeah. I think what I see beautifully, some of the work that you do within programs, I think a lot of people see, and David, hear this, um, they see the report and they're like, oh, I have in my cardiovascular section a suboptimality. In my detox section, I have one in, and they'll see all the suboptimals and they'll assume that, oh, I should do absolutely all of them. And I would offer most of the time that's not called for. This is kind of where a practitioner can come in and help you again look at that end in mind. What is the health goal? And that can support where we want to be focusing as well as what is actually presenting, right? A lot of times someone comes to me and they're like, hey, I want to work on I want thicker hair or I want to gain muscle. And then I look at their 360 as well as their blood work and I notice that their blood sugars are out of whack. And I'm like, cool, we got to do this work before we can do that work. Is that okay? So, again, it's that idea of having a practitioner to go through, know you, and support that journey, support that selection. Yeah. So,
Yeah,
I
and it's
hope.
also a moving target, right? Like, for example, earlier in the call, when I talked about how I have a suboptimal SOD2 pathway, but I also have looked at my 8 hydroxydeoxyguanosine numbers and it's low, like actually lower than you would think. That means that what I'm currently doing is appropriate and I don't have to go adding any more. If I went to a practitioner now as a patient and they tried to put me on X number of more mitochondrial and detox support on that pathway, I already know that my current approach is working well, right? So I don't have to push it any farther. And that's the value of looking at lab metrics as well as the genes, because the two of those give you the best possible snapshot of what's going on in your body and if what you're currently doing is enough. So,
I
yeah.
know. Love it. All right. Our next question is from Desiree. And there, it was a statement of red light therapy. So I'm speculating this is when we asked, like, hey, what do you guys want to hear about? And I don't think we covered red light therapy. So, Justin, what's your elevator pitch for red light?
I would say that every cell in your body has receptor sites for photobiomodulation. The body responds to light spectrums. That's part of what regulates our circadian rhythm. All of your mitochondria respond to light, and different wavelengths of light do very different things, right? So, for example, blue light, obviously, it kicks off the cortisol and it kicks off that whole mechanism for circadian rhythmicity. It also helps to do things like kill acne bacteria. It also happens to do things like whiten your teeth. There's good things that come with blue light spectrums as well. So each one, there's amber, there's red, there's near infrared, there's yellow. All of these different light spectrums have a little different impact on the body and it signals a little something different to the body. Red in particular seems to signal quite a bit of different healing opportunities. It's
Mm-hmm.
like it goes in and it penetrates your skin at different depths, and the different depths it gets to trigger different levels of healing. So that's why there's near, far, and mid infrared spectrums because they're all penetrating the skin to a different kind of a depth. I love red light therapy. The ability to just turn the sunshine on
Mm,
at the click of a button is fantastic. And
mm,
especially in the winter months, I find myself using red light quite a bit. There's limitations or a qualification, at least, to the above there because it is a hormetic stressor in and of itself. It's one of these things that can create oxidants if you overdo it. So that's
mm,
why we have time limits. I mean, most of the time when you buy a red light device, it'll have a little timer on there. Don't neglect that. You can't just sit there
mm,
and blast your skin with red light over and over again because you'll start to create free radicals. And that's what we're trying not to do, right? This is to help the mitochondria, not to gum them up with toxins. So it's another thing where there's the eustress, which is an appropriate dose of red light. Then it's distress if you overdo it. But I mean, circulation benefits, collagen benefits. It helps. I mean, you can shine it on your hair and it's good for your hair. You can shine it on an injury. It'll help you heal with the injury. You can shine it on your testicles and it'll help you with more testosterone. There's such versatility within red light that I'm a huge fan. But once again, do it appropriately. Get a good device. If you just go on Amazon and buy a red Christmas tree bulb, they'll call it red light therapy, but that's just a money making opportunity. So make sure you get a good brand as well.
mhm. Beautiful. Thank you, sir. Um, Sandra is asking, uh, actually, Sandra asked for everything that we've already covered so far. So Sandra, I think we touched on all the technologies mentioned here throughout the webinar. So I hope you were able to hear that. Um, let's see here. So Richard is asking the question of, can we explore and discuss the longevity supplements of NMN and NR and NAD? There's a few, and we'll get into the few um, that are in the news frequently, and that Dr. Sinclair speaks of. So Justin, do you want to give our audience a little bit of insight into what the NMN, the alphabet soup, is, what it's getting at, and kind of what all the hype is, and is the hype worth it?
Yeah, so I mean, NAD is a really important molecule for the mitochondria. I mean, that's kind of the pathway that it's operating on. And it's really important for, energy
Mm-hmm.
metabolism, especially during glycolysis and the Krebs cycle, right? So these are the energy producing kind of pathways in the mitochondria. Oh, DNA repair, sirtuin activation, which regulates aging, inflammation, circadian rhythm, oxidative stress management, like I just mentioned, and cell signaling and gene expression. All of these things are dependent on NAD. The problem is NAD tends to really slow down in its production as we age by up to like 50%. Once you get past 50, I mean, it's slowing down every year. So you're going to have mitochondrial decline potentially that comes right alongside it. And so NAD is one of these things that we want to build up in the body. We want to encourage and increase NAD to facilitate the Krebs cycle. These things that moderate the energy production in the body need NAD and need sirtuins as well. So the problem with just taking NAD is it's a really big molecule. It's like it's too large to just take it. So you're not going to improve actual NAD levels by taking NAD. What you need to do is rely on the precursor molecules there, and that's where the NMN and the NR, these different nicotinamides and niacinamides, come into play because they're precursors to NAD. We talk a lot about glutathione on here, and it's like a lot of people benefit more from the precursors, right? NAC, selenium, to build more glutathione instead of just overloading the pathway itself. So I'm a big fan of actually utilizing some of these precursors. I know that the more kind of cost-effective options would be like D-ribose and niacin. Like you can just use those and support the pathway. But NMN and NR are definitely pretty highly touted, and you can take them in combination as well. Um, I've used them on and off as well as peptides, which we actually haven't got into, but I use one called
Mm,
5-amino 1MQ, and that operates on the NAD pathway as well. And it helps to kind of salvage NAD. And all of
mm,
these things together will have a pretty good anti aging effect. But I will say, mitochondria are friggin' complicated. There's a lot going on in the mitochondria. Check out the webinars that we've done on there because NAD is one element. There's also, I mean, the electron transport chain, and it just goes on
mhm.
and on and on with supplements and strategies and protocols.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
NAD I'm a fan to summarize, but it's one element of many with mitochondria.
Yeah, and I think the one thing I'd really emphasize here, Richard, is NAD is a very expensive supplement, or it should be. If you're getting anything cheap, you're probably not actually getting it. It is a very expensive supplement, just simply based on what it is and how to stabilize it in a capsule formula. Um, Before you go spending that money, make sure your mitochondria has the other cofactors it needs to actually use and leverage NAD. So there's a lot of minerals you need. There's a lot of B vitamins you need. Your methylation needs to be on point. So checking out your methylation report in your DNA 360 and ensuring you're properly supporting it. All of those things are really important before you get to the NAD, or else I would argue to a certain extent you're going to be wasting money because it's kind of like saying, I want to build a house and then walking up with the key and being like, cool, this key can open the door, but the house doesn't have all that infrastructure and that stuff there yet. Make sure the house infrastructure is there before you take that key to the lock. I hope that analogy worked. I'm clearly not in construction. Tried. We tried.
That was good. That was really good.
Thank you. I appreciate you. All right. Our next question is from Sherry. And Sherry is asking, what are our thoughts on Urolithin A? So, Justin, do you want to mention to the audience what that is and then offer some thoughts? I think we have similar thoughts on this.
Yeah, so I mean, speak of the devil, right? Like we're talking about more mitochondrial enhancers and different ingredients and things that you can use. I think that the data is pretty solid on urolithin A. It's what's called a postbiotic, right? So it's not something that you're going to eat directly. It's something that gets kind of created in the gut biome in response to eating certain things like pomegranate. But you have to have a really specific layout of your gut bacteria in order to create the urolithin A from pomegranates. If you don't have that, you can have as many pomegranates as you want, and you're not going to create that postbiotic. So, certain companies now have kind of isolated it and made it so that you can just take it in supplement form. And it's really one of those things that helps to create new mitochondria. So, it's directly impacting that pathway. Um, I will say that it's one of those things that you can also pair with something like an Akkermansia to help kind of encourage that environment to build more of your own urolithin A as well. Because then you've got the probiotic component. You can also add prebiotics like apple pectin and things like that to do a pre, pro, and postbiotic strategy to create that kind of feedback loop to help your body have more mitochondrial biogenesis taking place. I like it. I've used it. I like it. What do you think, Dr. K?
No notes. Perfect. Love it. Love what you just said. And I really like they incorporated kind of the other considerations and some that include food too, right? Because I mean, as much as we want to get all our little bacteria critters from pills, or the OG source of that would be food.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Uh, I hope I'm saying this right. Shalian. Um, this is more a comment, but I just kind of wanted to echo because Justin needed such a great breakdown of red light. So she said, or they said that they used red light and infrared for a broken sacrum with nerve damage, and it greatly facilitated healing, which tends to be often what we hear, especially of more superficial meaning closer, ones that red light can actually get access to as opposed to deeper within the body. Yeah, awesome. Uh, Deanne's has a question. I hope I'm saying that correctly. Um, okay. So Deanne's, this was a comment around, are we going to be touching on biohacks that don't involve buying techs? So they're interested in hearing the variants. So Deanne's, I hope throughout the webinar you heard kind of when we were shouting out different genes and how that might be really important. I'd also offer that we have a really good library of webinars. That speak to, if your concern is mood and behavior, for example, here's a breakdown of genes. So I'd really, really encourage you as well, going into YouTube or going onto our website, and you can find a lot of those past webinars as well. Someone in the chat will also give links to that because while I think you're right insofar as we focused a lot on the tech and the lifestyle, et cetera, and not as much on the genes, there's a lot of webinars that we focused on genes. So I encourage you and other audience members to jump in there. Yeah. All right. Sheila is, let's see. Okay, I'm going to come back to that one. So Deanne's has another question here for you, Justin. BrainTap. Are you referring to tapping for neuroplasticity programming? So she's probably talking about emotional freedom technique or BrainTap technology. And so she just wants some clarity around that one. Do you feel good in giving an answer for EMF or, sorry, emotional freedom tapping?
Yeah, I believe that that's a pretty good technique, the EFT, right? Because it's like people use that for trauma and things, right? I'm not super familiar with it, but I could
Mhm.
speak to the brain tap. Am I on the right
Sure.
track with that,
Yeah.
or am I
Oh,
way up? Okay.
yeah. Yeah. So, so I'm not going to do the science justice. There's a few really good apps that if you want to get into it, but there's a few protocols that leverage tapping and leverage certain thought patterns. And so the element is let's interrupt certain thought patterns. Let's shift up brain neurochemistry, and it can be very pivotal for people who have experienced trauma or who are currently experiencing stress, anxiety, depression. It is a very strong tool for many of those, especially in concert with therapy and diet and a few other things. So it might be something a practitioner suggests. And beautifully as well, it's low to no cost. You can go on YouTube. There are apps. There's a lot of ways that you can access it. And we'll deal for those that are really excited by Chinese meridians or like TCM and acupuncture points. It touches on some of those too, which can be really helpful multimodalities there to support it. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's a fantastic protocol, and it's one of the more low tech, free ones that you can do. What I was mentioning is actual tech. So Brain Tap, I just saw someone in the comments mention it. His name's actually Dr. Patrick Porter. I've had conversations with him. Brilliant, brilliant guy, and Brain Tap is one of the coolest things I own. It's a device, and if you're not familiar with it, it's a headset that has like a visor, and they use photobiomodulation. So it has light that goes in the eyes and it has light that goes in the ears. When the light goes into the left eye, it charges the right brain and vice versa. And then the light goes in the ears as well because blood pumps through your body every 42 seconds, but it slows way down in your ears depending on how much cartilage and things are in your ears. So it takes like 5 minutes for the blood to go all the way through your ears. So while the blood is kind of trapped in there, the hemoglobin will actually be charged up with the photons of light. So it's shining light right into your brain, like, and it's charging those photons. And then the photons of light are then delivered in your blood to heal different things throughout your body. So you have this headset on, all you can see is the light. The light is also going on in your ears. And then they have these binaural beat tracks that play in the background, and they use a non-oscillating algorithm that your brain can't quite figure out because the brain is unbelievable at figuring out patterns. That's its whole thing. It wants to lock onto a pattern, and that's why typical binaural beats that you would buy on iTunes or whatever don't work for long. It'll work once or twice, but the brain's like, I know exactly what you're going to do next, and it figures it out. So it doesn't have the same response. The brain tap has really, really advanced algorithms that the brain can't quite lock onto because as soon as it does, boom, the thing changes. And there's thousands of different tracks on the app. So it comes with an app and you can play these different tracks and it helps pull the brain into these different wavelengths. Then behind that all, there's voiceovers that take place. So Dr. Patrick Porter gets on there, as well as other people. He's got other guests and stuff that do some of these recordings. And so the device has pulled your brain into a very receptive state. And then the voiceover happens while your brain is totally open to receiving the message. And it's just like imprinting positive messages into your subconscious. So I use it to kind of biohack that nap. There's energizing ones that put you in alpha and get you motivated for the day. I use it for a lot of reasons. You can use it 1 to 3 times a day, and it increases neuroplasticity pretty significantly. In fact, the studies that they did were done mostly on nurses, like female nurses, and we all know the friggin' stress that they must be under. I mean, that's quite a crazy job. They're working long hours, and they were able to increase neuroplasticity in a lot of these women by up to 70%, which is huge for brain aging, cognition, etc. So, if you have a predisposition for Alzheimer's or just any kind of like you don't make enough BDNF, we can look at all that with the genes. But this is one of those tools that helps to restore and repair that. I use it every day, and I love it. So BrainTap technology, that's what it is.
Got it. Thank you, sir. I
Yeah.
appreciate that. All right. Sheila has a question. Um, and Justin, I'm curious if you're familiar with this supplement. It's Feistin. Feastin. Have you used this before?
I think it's
Pheniston?
called Fisetin. I don't know
Visitin?
exactly how to say it. My understanding is that it's one of these herbal senolytics,
Mm-hmm.
which,
It is. Yeah.
yeah. So, I mean, that's as opposed to some of these pharmaceutical senolytics, I think that that may be a good place to kind of go towards first,
Yeah.
right? So, we get these zombie cells, these senescent cells that get built up. They don't quite die through natural just cell death programming, which is called apoptosis, but they're not really alive either. They're these, they call them zombie cells, right? So it's like they become compromised and then they don't quite die, but they sit there and they multiply and they also release inflammatory compounds into the body. So senolytics are there because they encourage apoptosis of these senescent cells. And you can do it via pharmaceutical means, or you could also do it via the herbal kind of route.
Mm-hmm.
So Fisetin, my understanding is it's one of those kind of herbal polyphenols that helps to encourage that whole strategy. And I think it can be a pretty useful thing to add in. With regard to the genes, I mean, we definitely would look at things like, mitochondrial genes for that. We don't really have a gene directly for senescence, but we can get a heck
Yeah.
of a lot of indicators as to how your cells are functioning with methylation genes, detox genes, etc. Do you have a different
Yeah.
opinion on that, Dr. K?
I'll be plain. I have not yet read kind of the clinical studies where it says we implemented this herbal and we saw this decrease or this higher rate of autophagy or whatever sort of cell death. So I can't speak to that. Assuming though it is a good agent, right? You're finding it from a quality source. I'd really encourage using something like de-aging or a methylation test to really check in on how the body is changing in regards to aging. Because I would speculate it's probably going to be a more expensive protocol just based on what it's trying to do. And so you want to have some laboratory markers that tell you your body's age relative to the world is slowing down, is getting better. So that would be one of the things that I think if you're going to invest in that, there's no, at least I don't know the contraindications to it, but I'd really want to know that you're putting your money in a worthwhile space. And so I'd look to something like DNA aging to test that. Yeah. All right. I know you have an answer for this one. Excuse me, Justin. Nancy's asking, do you have a recommendation of brand for the PEMF mat? I know you do have one. Do you want to share that again?
Yeah, I use the one from Higher Dose. It's called. They're a really good company. They make different sauna blankets, and I've seen they make like red light masks and all kinds of cool stuff. But that one was in an affordable price point, highly touted. I've used it for a long time, and I legitimately feel the benefits of it. So I'm finding it's giving me everything that I want, and I like that it's paired with the infrared therapy and things as well.
Mm-hmm.
It's great for pain management. Like PEMF was originally used only in pain management clinics. And now, we've got these companies that make it available for home use, and Higher Dose
Mm-hmm.
is fantastic for that. So that's the main one that I use. And I see that Patricia, and shout out to Patricia
Mm-hmm.
because I've met her a number of times. Um, she was saying that some of them range from $300 to thousands and thousands of dollars. So there's certainly a spectrum at play. And the higher dose one was kind of in the mid range of that, but very effective. And I've used it for a long time. So that's what I would recommend.
Love it. Beautiful. All right, Steve has our next question, and I'll take a first go at it. So, a couple of questions. They received their DNA 360 report about 3 years ago. Is it still relevant? Um, Now that they have the test, what are next steps? Um, okay, so first question first. The answer is yes. Your test is still very much viable. By and large, Steve, your genes don't change, and it's so your genes still apply to this day. The only thing that might change in the future is if lab techniques genuinely evolve, but I don't expect that to be happening for the next several years. So your test is good to go for quite a while. And then in regards to what do you do now? Um, I'm biased. I say work with a clinician because, again, I think a clinician who understands your genes and understands your health goal is arguably going to be the best person to help create that plan and next steps. But short of that, you might want to look on sections that, in particular, are giving you concern about your health. focusing in on that and focusing in on some of the recommendations there instead of trying to boil the ocean. I think it's tempting when people get their 360 back, um, they tend to hold on to points where it says suboptimal and forget points where it says you're optimal. And everyone's test has points. Everyone's genes contain optimal genes. Not all of them, but it does. So I'd really also remember to focus on what the good genes are tucked in there, as opposed to just the bad genes, which I find is what most people naturally and understandably cling to. Yeah. Justin, any other thoughts when someone first gets their test back?
Yeah, I would also suggest that supplements are not the only epigenetic signal that we have power over either, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, as far as first steps are concerned, I mean, I would look at the diet profile and start to kind of tailor that toward what's genetically appropriate. I would look at some of the areas that are suboptimal and think about what my health outcome really looks like right now. And think about it. Like if you have, we look at a gene called GSTT1, for example, which is associated with liver detox. And if you're suboptimal there, well, do you think you have a detox problem based on your life experience, right? Like you can do your own clinical correlation to start with. I don't think it means you have to jump right into a supplement protocol, but I must mirror what Dr. K said. I would talk to someone who eats, sleeps, and breathes what we talk about, functional genomics. Even a 30-minute session can get you really, really far because this is going to be a person who knows exactly what those red flags mean, clinically correlate it with what your life experience is, and tell you what the actual red flags are. Like, no, this part looks to be actually concerning. This part is a superpower. You're doing fantastic. And someone who can help you navigate because our reports are very well made, but it is something that I just said this last night. AI is not replacing Justin Harris. It's just not. Okay. Not yet, anyways. Right. So practitioners are going to pick up on certain things that the algorithm just isn't advanced enough to do yet. So that human element is also very useful. But think about what the genes represent and what systems they're talking about, and then correlate it to your own life experience. Like if you have a lot of skin issues and things, and you look and you say, oh, suboptimal liver detox, maybe there's a connection point there that's worth looking at with lab work, etc.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. Yeah. All right. Our next question is coming from Sheila. Um, are there genes that would make fasting contraindicated? By and large, Sheila, the answer is no, at least none that we report on. What I would be really mindful of is, though, from a mood and behavior perspective, those genes are really going to inform how you'll especially initially receive it, right? Because mentally it's going to be a stress. We're not used to not eating. And so a lot of people, it's not a food stress, it's actually just a mind stress that they go through. So mood and behavior can be a really good one. But I'd also really, really, really encourage you to talk with a healthcare provider before jumping into that for no other reason that, gender, health status, stress status, a few other things really play into what is an appropriate fasting protocol, if any. So if you want support on that, don't hesitate to reach out. CEO at thednacompany.com. Yeah. All right. Nina has our next question. And Justin, I'm going to speculate this is right up your alley. What is your opinion on ancestral feeding, eating a lot in one day, then starving for the next? Um, Nina's saying they personally achieve strong mental clarity this way. Um, and it's also kind of like a form of hormesis.
I think you nailed it, Nina. You answered your own question there. It works fantastic for you, and that really speaks to what I mentioned earlier in the call about these feast famine cycles. You know what I mean? Like you're giving your body those anabolic inputs, and you're really providing mTOR and these different things to build your body up, and then you're cleaning your cells out the next day, getting that AMP kinase pathway activated. Feast famine cycles are really what have regulated human metabolism for millennia, and I think that you're doing it a great way. It's really like an alternate day fasting strategy too. Like a lot of people will eat one day, fast the next, eat one day, fast the next. When you look at it from that ancestral perspective, I think that was a default setting because we didn't have supermarkets. Like you had to go out and earn that next day's meal, and maybe that means today you don't get to eat anything, right? Availability and having it everywhere is a pretty recent experience for us. So not eating for a day was actually, I think, a lot more common ancestrally than it is now. And you're just returning to that root. It's going to amplify BDNF. There's a lot of reasons why that makes you feel good. And if you're not having any downsides to it, then it's for you, and keep it up. I don't see a reason why not.
Mhm. All right, our next question is, I hope I'm saying this right, Santaya. Um, and then what is your opinion on hyperbaric oxygen therapy? So for those that aren't familiar, hyperbaric oxygen, you're kind of getting into a chamber. It's shifting the pressure so that more oxygen is able to dissolve into body, right? So it's kind of just um, enabling more oxygen. We know that oxygen is such a life giver within the body. Um, I see this as a medical intervention. It's prescribed a lot for people with chronic infection. Brain injury is a huge one in particular, amongst a few other conditions. First and foremost, in the news recently, some people have heard of, unfortunately, someone went to a facility that wasn't well managed, and a child died. And so the first thing I would say is make sure you're going to a really good facility. You don't kind of want someone who, like a back alley, whatever that would be. So find a really good facility. That's important. And then do make sure that you're working with a provider to ensure it's appropriate for you. There are some people, some health statuses that can't endure that. So just going and signing up isn't always the best option. And I would also offer, this tends to be one of those therapies where you're going to have to go several times in order to see benefit. So while some people, come out and say, "Oh, I feel amazing," the clinical benefit is something that you see after many different sessions. So be mindful of that. Make sure you have the money in order to able the budget to afford that, because it's not kind of those one and done. There has to be multiple sessions there. Yeah. All right. Um, I'm not going to say this correctly, but Serginu had a question around rapamycin, different protocols, and kind of saying that they've had some friends where it's been a huge success, and then they've had other friends where it's not so much. Justin, do you want to summarize for the audience why rapamycin is kind of very popular right now? And we can kind of dive into the what about that. Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, this is actually kind of stemming from what we just talked about as well. Like I was talking about mTOR versus AMP kinase, and rapamycin would be one of those fasting mimetics, is what it's actually called, right? So it's like it's giving you the benefit of suppressing mTOR, and there can be some uses there. I mean, overstimulating mTOR has certainly got some downsides, like I was mentioning. This is all about hormesis. Fundamental homeostatic mechanisms are always at play in the body, and the body strives for that. When something kicks us out of not hormesis, I'm sorry, homeostasis. They typed hormesis, so it got me all muffed up. I apologize. Homeostasis. Um, so there can be some upsides. I would say there can also be some downsides if you're not regulating it properly, because we also don't want to over suppress mTOR, right? The mammalian target of rapamycin, that's what builds our body up. We do need to have those phases as well. And I am a fan of some of these other fasting mimetics like spermidine. I think can give you some pretty good longevity benefits. And the benefit there is that you don't have to do the pain in the ass of real fasting.
Mm.
Right? Like you could do a normal 16 and 8 strategy, but use some of these mimetics and get some of those metabolites. And the logic behind that is that the more you go without food, certain metabolites start to get created in the body, right? Which has these fantastic autophagic properties. So it kicks in autophagy pathways, and that can be really useful for a lot of people. So you could take something like a spermidine, you could take something like a rapamycin and get those benefits. However, I have seen people, metformin as well, lose muscle mass from overdoing it, right? So there can be downsides to it, and I wouldn't do it without the guidance of a practitioner, but I have seen benefit to it. It just may not be for everybody, and there's other ways, you can also do fasting and kind of go the old school way. So that's my opinion. I think that there's use to it, but it's not for everybody. What do you think about that, Dr. K?
No, I think you captured that perfectly. And until I can kind of see the person before me and know their health history, it's really difficult to say, does this make sense relative to your goals, relative to your budget, relative. But I think that was a great capturing answer. Catherine has our last question of the evening. Um, And Justin, do you have a good red light recommendation, a product that you would recommend for red light?
Yeah, I use one called Vital. It's called Vital Red Light. And they've got quite a few different things, everything from like a handheld one that's like this, all the way up to the big panels. I would say Juve is definitely one of the bigger companies out there. My main recommendation is to make sure that it's reputable and not off of like just Amazon, like I mentioned. I've seen that people putting just literal red light bulbs, like an incandescent
Mhm.
bulb, into a lamp and calling it red light therapy, and you're not going to get the same benefit out of it. Incandescent bulbs are great actually for a lot of other
Mm.
reasons. I'm a fan of them as opposed to LED. They're easier on the eyes. But if you're paying hundreds of dollars for a red light device and that's all it is a Christmas tree bulb, you're getting ripped off and you should return it immediately. But yeah, Juve, Vital. There's one called Kala that's pretty highly touted, but I use Vital myself and had it for years. It does everything it says it's supposed to do, so I'm a fan.
Beautiful. All right, audience. Thank you so much for joining us today and for being such party and ushering us through the adventures that biohacking can be. I hope we were able to offer some insight, in particular, advocate for the idea of there's not a one size fits all. Some of these things can be great for one person, not so great for the other. So please do work with a provider. And if you're looking for a provider, don't hesitate to reach out to us. We can support that for you. Um, Justin, the one thing we did not talk about, and I know we're about to do it, dancing. It's got to be a
Beautiful
biohack.
biohack.
Audience, of all the exercise forms, dance offers the best mental health benefit, just putting it out there, which is why whenever we say au revoir, we dance out. So, Justin, thank you for doing this with me, sir. You are better read in biohacks in a discerning way than anyone else I know. And I'm so grateful that I got to do this with you. It gave me a lot of comfort as we navigated the crazy seas that is the biohacking. Yeah. Shall we
Absolutely. And I hope
dance?
everybody got some benefit out of it. And thank you, Dr. K. You're the chief science officer for a reason. You're one of the smartest people I know. And I love doing these with you.
Yeah. All right, sir. Let us boogie oogie. Au revoir, audience. Thank you so much. Au revoir.
Bye bye.
Merci. Your moves have like hella improved. I love it.
Love when you're sitting, but good night, everybody.